So what's up, guys? I'm back again. More BMW stuff. It's a grim video, but there's some hope to it. A few months ago, I was watching a video on YouTube where a guy was going to buy a BMW, and he realized, a used BMW, I think he wanted an M5 from, not a new one, an older one, and he went to a couple of dealerships, used car dealerships, and he realized the BMW E39 was valued higher than the BMW E60, as well as the I think the F10 M5s. They were valued for what you got, much higher. And he was like very curious. Even the older ones, the BMW E34 M5s, were, you know, astronomical compared to the newer M5s. And realized something he realized was cars aren't really collectible anymore from the mid 2000s to present day. Like if you're buying an M5 of today, maybe 10, 20 years from now, it'll probably be worth less money than an M5 20 years ago today would be worth. So it was something that I thought about a lot. And then I went back, I'm always on BMW forums. So let me come around to the front of the camera. So I'm always on the BMW forums, and I realized a lot of the questions we get asked on the BMW forums from new car drivers, new BMW drivers, is these young guys, and they want to like modify their cars and correct different things. Like if one guy was asking about paint swirls, and he's going to spend hundreds of dollars correcting the paint swirls or scratches on the paint. Mini scratches, not anything big or visual, but miniature scratches that he could only see. He's willing to spend like $500 to repaint or respray his car. And I realized like and it was a BMW E90, a 2011, like my car. And I realized, dude, you're wasting your money, because I've learned 3 BMWs in, these cars aren't collectible. And the money you put into these cars, you will never get back again when it's time to sell the car. I realized my BMW E46, when I was selling it, I think I mentioned on my channel before, had the hardest time selling the car. I basically got 2 customers that came to look at the car. And the first customer was either a young kid who didn't really have money and was asking his parents for money to buy the car. The parents kind of didn't want to spend over $2,000 for a car. At that point, when I sold my 2001, it was 2015. For a 15-year-old car, they didn't want to spend more than a certain amount of money. Even though my old car, my E46, was loaded, it was under 100,000. It didn't even have 90,000 miles on the clock, I think. It was loaded, very well kept. The car had literally no value to a modern consumer looking to buy a car for either a kid, or a kid even wanted a car. Most of the people that did want my E46 were like young teenagers that maybe grew up with fast cars and wanted like something nice and sporty for their first car. No adult in the right mind was willing to buy my E46. The dealership offered me like way below Kelly Blue Book for the car. And I expect the same thing with this car after a certain amount of years of owning it. So this video is the 5 reasons, I've went on a bit, the 5 top reasons BMWs, Mercedes, Audis, all luxury sporty cars are no longer collectible like they used to be. I'm going to start with this car. I'm going to get my wife's car. She has a Mercedes that we lease, and talk about how leasing affects the cars. Let the train go by for a bit. So we're going to go look inside my car, and basically I'm going to pop the hood and show you guys a couple of reasons why this particular car, and all the newer BMWs that are built similarly, are not collectible cars, or cars you probably don't want to buy after these cars have been on the road for 10 years. They're just not worth buying for, you know, for the car. Other than liking the car, liking the brand, liking the design. It's a beautiful car, but it's sadly enough, I cannot hand this car down to my daughter or anyone's, you know, my kids. It's not a car I want to keep for more than 10 years. So I'm going to show you guys why. Let's go inside the car and check the details. So the first thing on my list of 5 top reasons is cars are not, basically, they're not built to last more than 10 years. And I'm going to show you why in a minute. And a lot of stuff on cars now, you cannot, it's really, really hard to do it yourself. Now, the way this engine is built, it's a turbo engine. It's super twin turbo. It's a vertical engine. So a lot of the parts that are basic maintenance parts are really hard to get to. Now, the water pump on my E46 was right there behind the fan. It took me an hour to do it myself. The part was about $60, but I bought a special part. I think it was $180. I bought a Stewart EMP pump. this car, the water pump on this car, I'm using a water pump because it's one of the maintenance things every BMW like this will need to get done after the car reaches a certain mileage. I think it's about 10 years, 100,000 miles. A water pump, as well as other things in this car, is something you will need to replace. The water pump on this car is about $800 from the dealership. Some people, you can get it less. Other places, the dealership charges about $1,500 to maintain the water pump in a car like this. And that's something you're thinking of doing when this car is about 10 years old, 8 to 10 years old. The value in a car like this that's 10 years old is it's less than $10,000. You know, when you compare the mileage on a car like this, that a car like this would have after 10 years. So you're looking at maybe a $9,000 BMW with something as simple as a water pump costing $1,500 to replace. Now, the alternator is also something that's a wear and tear item that's buried inside the engine of the car. You have to take the engine apart to get to the alternator. It's labor intensive. It's going to cost you about $1,000 to do that. So it's just things I've done on my E46 by myself that cost me maybe $100 max. Hundreds of dollars. Is now you're looking at thousands of dollars to service in a car like this. Now, BMW puts a lot of tech inside the car, but the cars also get lighter and kind of there's more in a smaller car. So it's just too much labor to basically maintain basic parts. And I think that's what drives up the labor cost of repairing a car like this, and what makes a car like this undesirable when it's like 10 years old. Now, that's one of the things on my list. Also, the parts in these cars are not like your granddad's car. A lot of the parts are very lightweight. It's made with recyclable materials, soft plastics throughout the car. And BMW kind of skimps a lot to make the car lighter. So cars like this are not built to last like 10 years on the road. And that's why BMW, when they do their warranties and stuff like that, it's usually like 50,000 miles, 5 years, and they even reduce that now to like 3 years, 30,000 miles or something like that. So dealerships don't sell cars like this to last longer than 10 years on the road. If you have a car like this that's over 10 years old and you take it in to get work done on the dealership, you basically spending most of the value of the car just repairing basic things. Not like a transmission work or something massive. A simple thing like an alternator or water pump is costing you $1,000 or more. This is crazy when you think about it. I took this car and it needs seal for the oil filter housing. Basic part, the part is like $5, $15, something like that. But the labor to get that sealed and stuff like that, the dealership was charging me $1,300. And I was like, no way. It's something I should be able to do myself. I've done it on my old car. But simple labor, basic labor stuff is just too much money on a car like this. The next thing is the technology on modern day BMWs. And that's one of the things that the guy's name is Doug DeMiro. He has a channel. One of the things he realized, the technology on the newer cars are kind of limited to the time that the car comes out. So imagine my first BMW was a 95 318. That car was built in 1995. Imagine if that was built on a Windows 95 software. Pretty much that would have meant by 2000, 5 years into the car's life, the car might have been obsolete, because I believe a lot of Windows 95 components, hardware, software was not compatible with the newer hardware that was coming out at that time. So a car built on technology that's sort of limited in that time is going to be obsolete much quicker than a car without all the extra tech. So I think technology, and also maintaining the technology, maintaining the software, sort of it dates a car much quicker than a car that doesn't come with all the technology in the car. Like these cars have a lot of tech that controls everything from the drivetrain to the in-car entertainment to different things like Bluetooth, navigation. It's just too much tech that makes a car not really collectible. Because could you imagine driving around with this technology 20 years from now? Probably not. Maybe navigations will be 3D and different things. Maybe it'll be holographic. So the tech sort of makes a car not collectible. And that's my third thing on the list. So we're going to go look at my wife's car now and come back, and I'm going to go over a couple more things that make a car not collectible based on a new car. My car is a 2011, so you're looking at it from a perspective of a second owner on an older car. But let's look at it from a perspective of a 2017 brand new Mercedes SUV. and see why a car like that is not collectible at all. So switch the script. We're my wife's car, and is a lease. Is a 2017-2018 Mercedes GLE 350, and I recently reviewed this on the channel. But one of the things I wanted to point out before going outside and finishing my discussion about the technology being sort of a thing that ages a car really quickly. This is a 2017. The 2018 model is the same interior in the GLE vehicles, but the E-Class and I believe some GLA and GLC vehicles have this whole new navigation system where it's one long touch panel from the instrument cluster all the way to the navigation screen. And even by 2017-2018 standards, this I think this is like a 6 or maybe a 7-inch navigation screen. It's tiny by 2017 standards, but it's 2017 and this is a current model generation for the GLE, and the navigation is dated already because the new panel, the new touch panels, it's just one long, I think 20-inch wide touch panels on a 2018 E-Class Mercedes. So it's just to show you that even in the current year of a car being manufactured, the tech that comes in the car is dated already. Could you imagine, this is a 2017 car. We have a 3-year lease in this car. It goes back to the dealership in 2020, 2021. Could you imagine 3, 4, 5 years, the next owner is going to be driving around with a navigation screen like this, whereas maybe a Honda Elantra or Honda Civic, Hyundai Elantra or Honda Civic would come with like something much better than an $80,000 Mercedes, which is weird when you think about it. So the tech is something that really dates a car. Now, the reason I brought you guys to my wife's Mercedes is that this is a lease car, and in leasing a lot of cars over the years, I always wondered, like, we've seen 3 or 4 or 5 of these Mercedes come in our lives and leave 2 or 3 years later. I was wondering, like, what's the next story for that car? And then I realized, I spoke to the dealership Mercedes when we picked this up. I spoke to a really good guy at Mercedes of White Plains, and he was telling me a story that, oh, once you lease a car for 3 years and you give it back, it usually goes to some auction house where it's sold to a second owner. And most of the time, a second owner would finance a car through the bank because the car is still 3 years old. Most of the lease cars go back with between 30 and 40,000 miles, and on 30 and 36,000 miles is the max for a 3-year lease at Mercedes. So they get in a 36,000 mile on the clock car that's 3 years old. And this car was 70,000, 69,000 original. And this car would probably sell 3 years from now for about 49, maybe 50, if that much, to a second owner who's financing that car for maybe 5 years, a 5-year plan. Most banks do a 5-year, 3 to 5 year financial plan. So at the end of that financial period, let's go outside. It might be loud. That second owner is given. It's going to think about, do I want to keep this car? It's going to be 8 years old, and it's going to have a lot of issues. I mean, it's a luxury vehicle with like complicated parts. To change the light bulb on this car, I mentioned on my car, to change the light bulb, you have to go behind the tire and remove a hatch. And if you want to change, anything happens to the light, you have to remove the wheels. And my BMW is the same thing. You have to remove the tires, the front wheels to change light bulbs. So simple things like that cost money. Labor intensive to just change light bulbs. Would a owner of this car 8 years from now, just paying off the bank note on the car, would they want to keep this car? Probably not, because they would just buy a new car or just get into another financial plan with maybe another 3-year-old car or something like that. So a car's journey, and after that 8 years, most banks will not finance a car that's older than 8 years old. So we're looking at this car in 2025, 2026. With about 80,000 miles. Let's be generous, 80,000 miles, and maybe good condition. I don't know, a couple of accidents might be on it, I don't know. And it's gonna worth about $20,000. Now, a guy looking to buy a car like this that's about 8 to 10 years old, will they want to spend $20,000 on a car like this, knowing that it's out of warranty, it will have issues? All cars have issues after, I would say, 10 years. All cars have issues, big things that need to be replaced or maintained. So would someone with the third owner of this car really want this car for the price of ownership, you know? In saying that, like a car, when you think about it, most cars have like 8 years of a lifespan in terms of financial terms. So the third owner of this car 8 years down the line is gonna maybe just pay cash in it. Maybe a rich guy buy it for his kid, or Eastern European countries tend to buy a lot of cars from the US from, I guess, the dealership or whatever. They go back to Eastern Europe to become taxi cabs or whatever. So, and that's the end of the lifespan of that car. You know, it's gonna be 8 to 10 years old. It's gonna have 100,000 miles in it. And I don't know if you ever owned a Mercedes or BMW with 100,000 miles in it. You're looking at high maintenance costs. And it's gonna be laden with old technology, laden with a lot of stuff that sort of dates the car, and you probably don't even want this car. So a car like this is just going to become undesirable down the line much quicker than, say, my dad's car or my granddad's car. When my granddad bought a car in the 60s or 70s, that generation, they bought a car and kept it until that car literally drove off a cliff, caught on fire, or just stopped working and could not be fixed. My dad's generation in the 70s and 80s, when my dad bought a car, I remember my dad had a station wagon. We all loved it. We all grew up in my dad's station wagon. He bought that car and he drove it until it stopped working. And then he bought a new car. You know, my generation, I've already owned 3 BMWs, and I'm, you know, and I'm still young. And my wife, she's barely 30, and she's owned 4 Mercedes and 2 Honda and a Dodge car. 5 or 6 cars, and she's barely 30. She's owned 6 cars already. And not that there's anything was wrong with those cars, just that because of our leasing the cars, it was much cheaper for us to lease a car than to buy one of these. I will never ever buy a Mercedes. I love BMW, so that's my brand. That's maybe a car I would buy. But in terms of my wife and us, we would probably never buy this car outright. It would just be leased, and then we give it back in 3 years, and that's it. So a car's lifespan is not like it used to be. You know, cars like this is about 3 years, and then it's old, and no one wants it. You know. My dad's car stopped working. He could have still sold it or done something with it after maybe being on the road for 20 years. Our generation is totally different. So cars just are not collectible anymore. These are beautiful cars, and that's the sad thing about it. These cars are very beautiful, but it's just no one wants them after a certain time. You probably won't want it after owning this car for 10 years because something new is out, the technology is better, and you want that technology. And it's sad, and that's my video on cars not being collectible anymore. And I'm talking top of the food chain, maybe someone that owns and I've seen cars on the road like a Geo Metro car from the 90s that's still on the road going strong. A lot of PT Cruisers on the road going strong. A lot of Chevy Malibus from the 90s and 2000s going strong. But like luxury cars like this that cost, like I said, a water pump is $1,500 to replace. Alternators buried inside the hood. You have to spend thousands of dollars replacing the alternator. Even the battery of my car, I can't even take the battery out and put a new battery in. I have to take it to the dealership to get it coated for a car battery. You know, and that's gonna be $500 for a car battery. So I don't think anyone wants to deal with that after a car is older than 10 years. So cars just aren't what they used to be. And that's basically my video on that. More stuff coming, guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like. See you guys later.